Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. In a moment, I will be joined by Scott Springer for a discussion on manufacturing a great culture. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
So I'm Scott Springer, president of Chelwood Consulting Group. I started my consulting group about 3 years ago. We got different consultants that help manufacturing companies, everything from supply chain, manufacturing, engineering, maintenance, operations, quality systems. And that's what we do.
Very good. And I'm delighted to have you on. And as I told you before we got started, culture is a topic that I enjoy. I have written on it. And one of the things on my bucket list was to read War and Peace. And I couldn't stand it, but I said, I'm going to be able to tell people that I read it cover to cover. And at the end of the book, the novel ends and his philosophies begin. And one of the things he wrote was that culture is, and I wish I could have found the quote, I looked for it, and of course couldn't find it, and Google was of no help, that culture is how people think.
Yeah.
How do you define culture?
I think of it more like in a manufacturing plant, culture is how people feel when they're at work and how they interact with each other. And then that falls over to how do they interact with the customers, the suppliers, the different vendors you work with, right? So you create that culture that's like a positive culture, not a negative culture. And a lot of times in a factory, it's like you're looking for a continuous improvement culture and a very positive, like keep people together, almost like a family type environment.
Now, this is where I got into heated discussions with various individuals. I say that it is up to the owner of the company to impose the culture and then to have the employees accept it, and for the CEO to make sure that they respect the culture, abide by it, and help it to grow with the influence of the employees.
I would agree to an extent. Now, if the owner's there all the time, then yes. If the owner's not there, they'll set the vision on what the culture's like. The CEO, managers need to impart it. But if you think about your chain of command, as you go down your chain of command, wherever that breakdown in culture is, everything below that tree becomes infected with like a toxic type environment. So you got to make sure it's down from the top all the way down and that everybody's following the culture that you want to set for your company. And every company is different.
But shouldn't the basics be the same for every company if they're going to be successful? Be considerate, take your job seriously.
Yeah, those are table stakes, right? So you got those, but then you have, who's making the decisions, how the decisions are made. What type of, is this a humorous or a quiet environment? Like I generally in my plants, we were pretty boisterous. We had a good time. We would laugh a lot. I would always do like the self-deprecating humor myself, making fun of myself, and then everybody else gets to laugh at themselves too. It's like, it's not just laugh at one person. try to have a good time. In manufacturing plants, you're there for 10 to 12 hours a day. So you might as well have fun while you're doing it.
Mhm.
There's a great videos if you've ever seen the Seattle fish market, and there was a book Fish, and they talk about this is like one of the worst environments. It's like it's cold, it's wet, it smells of fish. And if you ever watch videos of that place,
Mhm.
all the people working in it are having fun. They're tossing the fish around, they're singing, they're scaring like customers with the fish by like, faking throwing at them. They're just having a good time. And this is like the worst work environment you can think of. You can do that in any work environment. Have fun.
One story that has always inspired me is a hospital brought in an outside consultant to see how their teams were working, and they started with the surgical unit. I don't know if it's called unit or ward, whatever.
Yeah.
And they interviewed everyone. And the person who was most proud of their work and of their contribution to the welfare of the patients was the janitor.
The guy cleaning up before the surgery.
Cleaning up before, after, making sure nobody slipped on anything, and we don't have to expand on that. Everybody knows what I'm talking about.
Yep.
It wasn't the surgeon, it wasn't the nurse, it wasn't the technician, it wasn't the anesthesiologist, it was the guy cleaning the floor.
Yeah.
And that made them all thrilled.
Yeah.
Because that was their proof that they had manufactured a positive culture.
From the top down, right? Yeah.
From the top down, and in a way from the bottom up, because he had an impact on the staff.
Yeah.
If the guy who's cleaning isn't complaining, what do you have to complain about?
Exactly.
The topic is manufacturing. Now, at first, I thought that just was a way of saying creating a culture.
And it is.
But you're also a manufacturing company. So when
Work with
you wrote
manufacturing.
manufacturing, what did you have in mind?
So it's kind of like how we started the discussion. It starts with a vision of what the culture should be like. And it's every time I went to new plants before I started my consulting company, I was kind of like the turnaround guy. So I would get headhunted, move to a plant, get promoted, take over multiple plants, get headhunted, go to a plant, and so forth. And whenever I went into a facility, very seldom was the culture that I wanted my facility to be like. So I'd be a plant manager, director, I'd be over the organization, that smaller part of the organization. And so I always had to come up with a strategy of what were the steps I needed to do? Where were we in that journey to being considered a great culture? And I'd have a plan. I would develop a plan. And then over the year, 2 years, I would manufacture that great culture. I would create the great culture. It didn't appear overnight, right? Sometimes you got to change people's attitudes or change out the people, right? Not too often you got to change out, but sometimes you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I had some managers that just would not stop being belligerent or harassing to the people below them. I would have some people on the floor who were constantly nagging, picking fights with their coworkers, and it's like change the people or change the people is one of the two. 98% of the people buy in and change, right? Because it's a good culture. It's fun. It's like they enjoy coming to work. They enjoy working with their coworkers when you get to the end goal of creating that great culture. But very seldom is it there at the beginning. So it is you're manufacturing the culture. And it doesn't have to be just in manufacturing. It's any office environment, a store, whatever it is, doctor's office, the hospital, like you were talking about,
One example that actually comes from manufacturing that I've liked, and I've tried to get non-manufacturing businesses to adopt. I forget what it's called. You'll probably know it. In Japan, there is a culture where every employee has the right to literally stop
Yeah.
the assembly line if they see something wrong.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's,
It's called the senior moment.
yeah, I try to instill the Japanese lean manufacturing culture to, the plants that I work with. And that is one of the factors, but it's also a big factor in the Japanese manufacturing is listening to people on the floor and empowering down so that people can make that decision intelligently to shut down a plant or a factory or a line or a piece of machinery when it needs to be, and that comes to training and trust and, you know, people understanding their job well. It empowers them to do it. And then they take ownership in their job and their job satisfaction by doing that.
I said, just so that viewers will understand, it's called the senior moment because I thought you were thinking about the name for the Japanese
Term to do
process,
that.
the
Yeah.
term.
Yeah. I'm drawing a blank on it.
And the screen froze, and I thought you were just thinking about it. So I can't remember it, you can't remember it. We will move on. Can you give an example of how you turned around a culture, how you got buy-in without having to fire 98% of the staff, just 2%?
Oh, no, most of the time it is 2%
Yeah,
or
yeah, no,
less.
I know.
And just, most of the places, none. Yeah, but there were a couple times where I had to get rid of people. So one of the things that I like to do, and I did this at my first plant as a plant manager like 15 years ago. A lot of times factories, they do like a monthly town hall meeting or a monthly safety meeting. And the first plant I took over was major safety issues, major quality issues. I mean, it was across the board. It was just like, and it was the cool thing was my boss when he was interviewing me at the time, he was Steve Coos, he was a VP of operations, and he basically laid it out during the interview what I'm walking into. So it wasn't a surprise to me. I knew what I was getting into. Um, but what I started doing at that first plant, and I've done it at most of the plants I've worked at since then, is instead of doing like a monthly or quarterly meeting, I did them weekly. Entire plant weekly, sometimes multiple meetings so we could cover all the shifts, where we talked about safety, we talked about quality, we talked about issues we're having in the plant. We talked about different cultural things on how we wanted people to act and view different things. Like we talk about, I hate to use the word diversity, but we always had like very diverse cultures in the plants that I worked at. Male, female was usually about 50-50%, plus or minus 5%. It was usually in that 55 to 45 range. We would have, the most I ever had, I had 17 different spoken languages in one of my facilities. Which was really cool. We called ourselves the United Nations, because it was like all these different cultures. And it's not a matter of like tolerating or, it's a matter of celebrating the different cultures. And when you show people that, when you open their eyes to that, people like learning about each other and their different religions, their different cultures, their home countries where they came from, or their hometown that has like, there's different like ethnic towns around the country.
Sure.
And then they bring their foods in. You have potlucks and everybody brings in their types of food. But those weekly meetings, we talk about stuff like that. We talk about the issues in the plant. And then, because a lot of times it doesn't get down to the floor employees. In other words, if we have a customer complaint, not everybody in the plant might hear about it normally. Well, at those meetings, we share the customer complaint so that they know. And it's not just written on a board somewhere. And that's how I've done it at almost every facility. And it's just one of the factors, but it opens up that communication. It allows people, usually the first few months, they're, not engaged, I'll say. By about a year, they start to get engaged. By the end of the second year, it's like you can't shut them up in the meetings. It's like, okay, guys, we got to stop, because they're all engaged in the meeting and talking about the topics. You get into brainstorming and create this teamwork environment that it usually comes out pretty good.
I did a couple of things in places that were not extremely, but somewhat toxic. I had to go out and purchase, we were giving awards to some high school kids. So I had to go and get some trophies. And when I was in the store, I saw a small trophy with a turkey on top. And I asked the owner how long it would take and how much it would cost to put a plaque on it that said best line of the day or best line. And he said $5, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
About. I knew that as soon as my boss saw it, he'd say, "We didn't order that. How much did you? We're not paying." That's exactly what happened. I said, "No, this is just mine. It's got nothing to do with anything." I like self-deprecating humor as well.
Yeah.
I can dish it out. The rule is, as you know very well, if you dish it out, you have
Better be able to take it.
Yeah, that's right. And I knew sooner or later somebody would say something. And one of the bookkeepers said to me, or just said, "Well, I'm not paying the pest control bill. It didn't work." And the boss, who was standing there with me, said, "What do you mean it didn't work?" She said, "Bruce is still here." And I then went into my office. I got out the trophy. I said, "Here, you get to keep this until I say somebody else deserves it more."
Oh, so it was best line, like comical.
Best line, comical, that was it. Scott, they would fight. What do you mean you're taking it away? Who said? Okay. All right. If she said that, if he said that, fine. Another thing I did, I was asked to do, was to take over a nursing home's newsletter because it was done by HR and nobody read it. Nobody understood.
Yeah.
It was boring. What HR would write on a sheet, 8.5 by 11 page, page and a half, I'd write in a little paragraph and everybody understood. The rest was all humor.
Yep.
Silly things didn't matter. And I would focus on one or two employees. Well, the jealousies and the fights. Why don't you write about us?
Yeah.
And now this was all unintentional. It was not really to build anything. It was just to see if I could lower the tension. Now, the tension in the nursing home is very high, as you can imagine. But this was all, the positive results were unintentional. And at the nursing home, the board said, "This was brilliant. How did you come up with it?" I didn't have an answer. I said, "I just thought it'd be fun. I wanted to see what would happen." The unintentional can lead to positives.
Oh, yeah.
It can to negatives.
I did one. I used to do it my first few plants. I haven't done it in the last couple. Very similar. You remember you used to have those day calendars on your
Sure.
desk? And I used to always get a Far Side calendar.
I know.
I love Far Side, Gary Larson, all the stuff.
Yeah.
And then what I would do is, like, every once in a while, one would pop up, as I pull them off by day, and I would save some for like future things. And I would change the names of the people to myself or different senior managers' names, like making fun of ourselves. And then we would have a board and post them throughout the year and put like one or two up, a week that fit what we were going through or how we acted or stuff like that. It's just, it was funny. I actually got, if you look back here behind the rock, right there, that was a little placard that one of my supervisors gave me. And it was like, it's like, whatever you do, don't mess with the big effing gorilla. And it's a picture of King Kong like pounding down on somebody. He gave it to me as like a joke, You know, and it's just like, it's just funny, you know, just like make fun of each other, have a good time. And you gotta laugh at yourselves, especially in a manufacturing plant. Stuff goes wrong every single day. You got customer issues, supplier issues, you know, and it's just people issues, right? You know, and those little Far Side comics, they were funny. I haven't done it in a while. You know, it was fun.
I was ghostwriting a book for a consultant for, wasn't just manufacturing, it was any type of business.
Yeah.
And his partner was an engineer. And seated right, or not seated, located right beside his desk was a mini fridge and also a box. So when we were having our sessions, he would sometimes take a drink out, and I'd say, you notice how he never shows us the name on the can? Will tell us it's Coke, but it's really Budweiser or whatever. And he
Yeah.
laughed. It was fine with that. Then he had this box. And I said, what is that thing? And he said, it's a 3D printer. And I said, okay, we've got a number of explanations. First, you don't work well with others, so you want to keep it near you. Second, you don't share your toys, so you want to keep it with you. Third, it runs on 110 and the factory is 220. Fourth, it can't be in the factory because the machinery vibrates and that would mess up the 3D printer. Then he stopped me and he said, you're getting close, but I'm not going to let you get there. And he goes, it's too hot in the manufacturing area
Yeah.
for the machine to be there, for the 3D printer to be there. And I'm laughing. And the executive assistant to the gentleman for whom I'm writing the book is laughing. The guy that I'm writing a book for is not laughing. And that was my first sense that there was going to be a problem. Because it's so important. I've done 200 some odd interviews. You're the first person to bring up the importance of humor.
Yeah.
So I commend you for that. And I'm shocked that it hasn't happened before and I haven't thought of it.
Yeah, you know what? It's like, it's funny when I first start out until people work with me for a few months. It was like I would like make comments, and sometimes I do the dry sense of humor. You know, I'm from New Jersey. You are too. You know, we got a pretty twisted sense of humor.
Yeah.
Some states don't appreciate it as
Oh,
much
no,
as
not at
other
all.
states, right?
Not at all.
I live in Illinois now, and Illinois is similar to New Jersey's sense of humor. But sometimes I would make a comment, and all of a sudden I see the look on people's faces like I'm joking. It was a joke, and they're like, "Oh, okay," and then they laugh. They realize I wasn't serious about whatever I said. You
I
know?
went down, I had a client, they hired me to find I believe it was a director of development, chief fundraiser. It was a Presbyterian organization, and they brought me down and they put me up in a hotel, and the hotels in this town also had casinos that were on barges because you can't gamble on land.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the executive director asked me if I had been to the casino. I said, no, I don't want anybody to say, oh, they brought a guy down and he spent his time gambling. So I didn't go near, and he appreciated that, and that was fine. Now, the board was also staying at this hotel, and they would send a shuttle for us. And there was an elderly board member, and I looked at her and I said, are you guys going to get into trouble for bringing me down here? All the other board members knew exactly what I was talking about. He did not. She looked at me and she said, Bruce, I want you to know that we serve the entire community. We have many clients of the Jewish faith, and et cetera, et cetera. And I put my arm around her, and the other board members were red with embarrassment.
Yeah.
I put my arm around her and I said, thank you very much. That makes me feel very good. Very good. but I wasn't referring to that. I was referring to the fact that I'm a Yankee. And she said, now that could be a problem. And then everybody laughed, and that was the end of it.
Yeah.
And how humor destroys tension.
Yeah.
And I hear of doctors telling jokes while performing delicate surgery. And okay, they can laugh and not shake their hands, or they know when not to laugh.
Yep.
But I commend you because, like I said, you're the first to bring up the importance of humor, and humor has to be part of a successful culture.
And it can't be, you got to make sure it can't be mean humor.
Yeah.
It can't be, racist, sexist, or, any of that type of humor. There's so much opportunities to laugh, especially in a manufacturing plant. The best thing to make fun of is the equipment, because the equipment doesn't, they won't take it personal, right?
No, I'm laughing because I've never worked in a manufacturing plant.
Yeah.
And the equipment is, the computer, the printer,
Yeah.
whatever. But twice I accused, well, once she was a colleague, once she was a neighbor. I told a colleague, you really shouldn't be stealing the pens. And she looks at me, what are you talking about? No, it was a guy. I said, you really shouldn't be stealing the pens. He goes, why? I said, because they're cheap and they leak. Look at your pocket, and the ink had leaked into his shirt, which he was not happy about, but he thanked me for warning him. The other time, we were in a office building, different companies, and the secretary of the office across from ours, who we were friendly with, came out with her boss, and her boss and I were waiting for the elevator, and she came out. And I looked at her and I said, now you see, this is my problem. I said to the boss, I don't know whether to compliment her on her fashion sense or her mode of stealing office supplies. And she looks at me and she goes, what are you talking about? I go like this. She had a pencil stuck in her hair. She was mad at me. Oh, was she mad at me?
Oh, really?
I mean, she knew that the boss was laughing. Nobody, you can't accuse somebody of stealing a pencil or a pen for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, they walk out with a ream of paper, that's different. But everybody takes pencils, everybody takes pens. It's just, you forget. So, like you say, you laugh at the person.
Yeah. Yeah, we would have, like, I worked in a lot of food and supplement plants, and we would have like hairnets. And how many times people forget that they're on and they walk out to their car and they're driving away in their hairnets, very similar.
Yeah.
But you mentioned like HR people. I was pretty fortunate in most of my facilities. I had very easygoing HR people, like HR managers, HR reps, director of HR, whatever. The ones that really stomp a culture are those, I call it a stereotypical corporate HR person. The one who has a policy for everything, how to go to the bathroom, how to wash your hands, how to do that, and it's like everything. And if you don't follow it, it's like, oh, you didn't follow the policy, I remember we would have like fun holiday parties, at the end of the year celebrations and stuff. A lot of times we would do them in January even because it was like December was full and we were always busy. And I remember one time getting a new HR person, and she hands me like 2 drink tickets, and I'm like, what the heck is this? It's like, those are your drink tickets. You're only allowed 2. I'm like, yeah, right. That ain't happening. And it's like, we have a good time, at the parties or whatever. And again, be safe, don't drink and drive, don't harass people, but have a good time, wherever you're doing.
I'm standing, this is at a nursing home. Health is important at a nursing home.
Yeah.
I see a colleague at her desk I don't realize the HR director is behind me. It made no difference. And I went over to her, the executive assistant, and I said, I say this with the utmost love and affection. And the HR director said, Bruce, you can't talk that way. And I looked at her and said, yes, I can. And I looked at her and I said, I say this with the utmost love and affection. You look like crap. Go home. Well, a couple days later, she came back. She had like 102 fever when
Yeah.
she got home. And just goes to what you're saying. We have gone a little bit over the half hour. So what I want to do, and I thank you for it, I've enjoyed this immensely, is to share your contact information. And I have one final question for you.
Okay.
Is there anything I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
You know what? There's one other simple thing that people can do to create the culture. And it's like goes back 1,000 years. It's like food. It's like, the secret to marriage is like food or what, I forget what the saying is, but it was like in a manufacturing plant or office, it's like simple lunches. And I used to do at a bunch of the plants, I would do, if they reached a certain level, it was a free lunch. And it wasn't necessarily for the one manufacturing line that achieved it. It was for the whole plant. So it's like the whole plant was behind the one manufacturing line to, perform. And so they would support him. And it was the line that made the most money in the plant. It's like the other lines had to do well too. But it was simple things like, and not like the pizza, you always see like the memes and it's accurate, it's like, oh, company did great, here's a pizza. It's like, no, have it regularly. Few places I worked, we just had free food for people. But if they did well, we catered in, nice food, like really nice food, not just Jimmy John sandwiches or something like that. And Jimmy John sandwiches are good, but it was like, we got in nice food.
Saying that.
What's that?
Thank you for saying that. The sandwiches are good. Any complaints would have gone directly to you.
No, but I'm saying, it's like have really good food regularly and offer people food. People don't work as well on an empty stomach. So have granola bars or bags of, trail mix available at lunch for them or at their breaks time in case they don't have lunch or can't afford a lunch. I was working at one place and people would get hired. I just started working there and it was like they didn't have the food thing going on at the time. And people would come in and they literally couldn't afford food and they would pass out on the line from just working and not eating during the day. They would just, they would get lightheaded and get faint just from the heat and the lack of food.
Amazing. Scott, I thank you profusely. This has been great. You provided a wealth of information. I'm sure our viewers appreciate it as much as I do.
Thank you, Bruce.
I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.